I'm Nurse Jessica Seitz.
And I'm Nurse Erica.
And we're Nurses Uncorked,
the podcast that takes nursing facts
with nursing comedy and makes a little cocktail out of it.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts, and please rate, review, and download.
Hey guys, welcome back to Nurses Uncorked. It's Nurse Jessica Seitz again. I think we're on episode 63. Woo! Nurse Erica is here with me as always. And this week I have a friend, and I've been looking forward to doing this for a while. We've been having trouble kind of getting dates set up. My friend here, Jamal Chubb, is with us. He's had he's been moving. He's had a lot of crazy things going on. So I am so thankful that you are here, Jamal. Before we tell everybody why you're here, I want to say thank you and welcome to Nurses Uncorked. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I am so humbled to be with you guys.
I'm so
excited.
Thank
you for making time for us. We appreciate it.
This is going to be a great episode. Get your tissues, people.
I was just going to say that. Get your tissues.
Grab your Kleenex. And you'll see why here in a little bit. So Jamal is somebody that I met through social media. It's kind of strange to say that, but sometimes that's how friendships happen. But how we met through social media was, unfortunately, his wife, while pregnant with their third child, contracted COVID virus. And this was before the vaccines yet were approved from the CDC for pregnant women to get vaccines. So Cierra was not in that time frame, unfortunately, of even having the option to get the vaccine. So Cierra contracted COVID-19, and from there, the story is heartfelt. It's crazy. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's go back to the end of July 2021. And for all the nurses listening, we know just hearing that date, that time frame, what it was like. But at that point, your wife had been in the hospital for about 1 week and was in the ICU on a ventilator with COVID. And you made a video on TikTok that went absolutely viral. Can you tell us about that day and what compelled you to make that video?
Yeah. So, so to be correct on the time frame, I made that video right after Cierra and I had a conversation with medical professionals over the phone about putting her on a ventilator.
Okay.
Right. So that was, hey, if this doesn't turn around, you're going to be put on a ventilator. And, boy, that was such a ordeal because lots of people have been saying what they thought COVID was and what it wasn't. And for me, I just knew that in real time, I was going to want to show people what was actually happening with my family. I felt like that was imperative. And I felt like as a person who needed support as I was about to face the biggest wave of sickness that we as humans hadn't seen the likes of in 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to need every single person to see what was happening.
How did she feel about that? Like, knowing that you might go on a ventilator, like, was she scared? Was she in shock? Like, how was Cierra during that?
Well, at the time, her health was in real decline.
Uh-huh.
So, and she had just given birth to our son, Miles. So I'll tell you what the doctors told me on that call, because she wasn't on the call. It was just myself. It was, and my in-laws. And
she wasn't on the call.
No, she wasn't on the call.
Okay.
They said, hey, Jamal, we're giving you a call because we do believe that in the next 48 hours, we may have to put Cierra on a ventilator. We asked her what she would want to do if she was non-viable, and the only thing that was keeping her alive was the vent. And she told us she doesn't know to ask her husband.
Mm.
Okay, I'm gonna start crying already. I can't. I just
And
cannot imagine that.
and at this point, our text messages, I was calling her every day because I had to leave the hospital and I wasn't allowed to be there. And then it went from calls, and the calls got less and less and less. And then it went to texts, and the texts got less and less and less. And then it went to conversations with the hospital, and not conversations with Cierra.
Yeah.
And so that's when I really knew that I had to do anything and everything that I could to make sure that my best friend, the mother of my children, made it out alive.
I don't think that we mentioned how far along she was in the pregnancy. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Cierra was 38 weeks pregnant when she had an emergency C-section with Miles. So I believe 38 weeks is considered full term. You're the medical professionals, not me. So
That's Jessica's specialty.
37 technically, but we like to get them actually to 39 is ideal. But
and she was running into a situation where her platelets weren't. The platelet number was really low as she was getting ready to deliver. So they had to try to give her things to thicken up her blood, I believe, before she could deliver and before. But they were against the clock because her oxygen was struggling, and so was Miles's oxygen.
okay.
So they had to put her to actually, they gave her whatever they were giving her to get her platelets numbers up. And miraculously, when they shot up to an acceptable level, they put her to sleep and delivered Miles. And so the first text message I got from her after she delivered Miles, which was on the 26th of July, 2 days after her birthday.
Yeah, she was admitted on her birthday, right, to the hospital?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And so the first text message I got from her was, "I'm alive. I'm awake."
Gosh.
And at that moment,
Wow.
that's when I thought this was over. I was like, "Oh, great, the baby's here." You know,
Right, we did it.
We did it. I come to the hospital. Everything's going to get better from there.
Gosh, some of the things that we forget about during COVID is the separation. Like, typically it's so different, the way the father is there the whole time. And, it's like, it's almost like we've blocked that part out a little bit, How did she figure out that she had COVID? That's another thing that, I mean, I know she tested positive a few days before going to the hospital, but she wasn't feeling good. And what, did she go to the OBGYN and they tested her, or how did that happen?
Yeah. So our daughter was at a Cierra begged me to let our daughter go to an outdoor sports camp because being outdoor was like okay at the time.
Okay.
It was like,
Yeah.
hey, if you're outdoors, like it's cool. And I'm like, babe, I don't know, man. And she was like, Jamal, we've been in the house, we've masked, we followed every protocol, we've done all the things. There's a vaccine out now that is coming for people, and I had been vaccinated several months prior myself, and like let's just let her have this 3-day sports camp that's outdoor.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, sure, babe. And on the last day of the sports camp, which was July the 19th, our daughter woke up complaining of a headache.
Oh boy.
And complaining of the light bothering her really, really bad.
Yeah.
And having some nausea. And she came in and she said, Dad, I don't feel good. I feel awful. But today is the last day of the sports camp and I get to show you the cheer that I learned. Would you please let me go? And I said, no, baby. I said, right now something is happening in the world.
Yeah.
And what you're going through could be nothing, but we want to make sure that we don't give our germs to other people. So you need to stay home. So that happened. And Cierra, being the mom that she is, just grabs Libby, pulls her into the bed with her. Libby is our older daughter. Her name is Eden Olivia. We call her Libby. I affectionately call her Junior. But pulls her right in to the bed with her and just holds her and snuggles her. She does what moms do.
Yeah, absolutely.
The following day, our daughter was starting to feel better, but then our son Langston was not feeling well.
Mm.
And what does she do? Cierra, being the mom she is, pulls her right into the bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know,
Before you knew it.
before
How many
we knew
days
it,
later did she start feeling something? Was it a couple days or?
so if that happened on the 19th, she started feeling bad on the 20th.
God, it's crazy how quick that it just
Right.
spreads.
And when I say feeling bad, like sniffles, she's had
Yeah.
sniffles.
Right.
And then the sniffles turned into like a small cough.
Mm-hmm.
And then the small cough turned into a fever and a little bit more of a cough. And I said, babe, I think you might have COVID. And she's
Right.
like, no.
Not me.
No. And I said, you need to go to a hospital and get checked. And so she talked to her friend whose husband nearly died from COVID as well the previous year.
Mm-hmm.
And said, hey, this are my symptoms. Do you think I have COVID? And that friend, who is Caitlin Ortera, a great friend of Cierra's, said, hey, don't play with that. Go get tested. She got tested, I think, on the 21st.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, she had COVID. And that next night she went to bed. That cough kept her up the whole night. And it would subside and get a little bit better. But then the next night, it got worse. And so much so, she consulted her OBGYN and said, hey, as long as it's just a cough and your oxygen is good, you don't need to go in. Just stay home. So we got her a pulse oximeter for her finger.
Mm-hmm.
And her oxygen started dropping from 98% saturation to, at night, it would be like 90%.
Oh boy.
And
That's a big change.
And then the next day it went from 90% to saturating between 90 and 88%.
Mm-hmm.
And then her birthday came around. I'm like, man, maybe we'll get some luck. 90 to 88 to now we're looking at 87, 85% saturation.
Yeah.
So she goes into the hospital, at the local hospital where we lived, and they ran some tests on her, and they said, not only do you have COVID, but you have double COVID pneumonia. And we can't treat you and your pregnancy here. So we need to, because we don't have enough resources, we need to get you to a hospital where they can treat that. And as soon as that was the case, the very next day, she went to a bigger hospital in Columbia, South Carolina, where they could treat her symptoms.
Yeah. Poor thing. She probably felt so awful. I'm assuming if you feel like you can't breathe well, she must have felt so drained. In that viral video, obviously I saw it just like millions of other people did. You said something towards the end that really stood out for me. You said, I understand that only 2% of people in the nation die from COVID, but that 2% is 100% of somebody's life. And I thought that statement was so profound because it is true. While that 2% sounds like, oh, that's so small and chances of dying from it are minimal. If that's someone you love, you don't want 1%. You don't want 0.0001%. Did you state that because you felt like there were people that obviously were downplaying COVID and how serious COVID could be? Can you elaborate on that? What made you say that? What were your thoughts at that moment?
Yeah, so I was just seeing the rhetoric around COVID far and wide about what it was and what it wasn't. And, people saying it's just the flu, it's just a cold, it's not a big deal. In some of the circles I was running in, people were saying like, oh, it's just some small sickness. And, I don't know what circles you run in, but it was like, God is stronger than any, little sickness that could come. And I'm not trying to take anything away from those people.
Right.
But that was their mindset. So I saw lots of people not masking, not, taking proper precautions because it wasn't a big deal. I saw some rhetoric, that said that, this was God's judgment on people. And I hope you don't mind me sharing like that
No,
aspect of,
not
I,
at all.
Not
I
at all.
just, and not to be too controversial and to whoever's watching, I just really want people to understand that this was not a political issue. Vaccination was not a political issue. This was not a religious thing. This was a health issue that we wanted to make sure far and wide people knew what was actually happening. So anything I
Right.
said,
100% agree with you.
was not to discredit people's politics or their faith. It was to get them clear on your health is important. And I don't want you to have to rely on whatever you're believing is going to protect your family when there might be some other steps that are provided divinely by scientists and medical professionals and all those other things. So
As nurses,
good for you.
that's how we're right there with you. That's exactly how we felt about it.
And we perhaps
yeah.
more than anyone really were, confronted with that on a daily basis from people with all their other views of, it's not that serious. It's this, whatever. I mean, it was exhausting to say the least as a nurse throughout all that.
And don't get me wrong, I am a person of faith, right? I believe in God. I believe in a higher power than myself. But with that being said, I know that God created wonderful professionals in these fields for a reason. And I believe that the number one way we see miracles is because we're partnered with each other in community. And so I'm definitely heeding the words of the doctors and the medical professionals that had a fix on what was happening, and I value the words that they were saying to me.
Thank you.
And we'll link this. I was going to say we'll link this video, the viral video, in the description. But you have to picture it. Jamal has Miles on his chest. Okay, Jamal is now a dad being thrust into taking care of a newborn alone by himself. Because
and
Cierra,
the other kids.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it really was. I just remember in your eyes, you looked like you were like lost while you were saying what you were saying. You just looked scared, like you could sense. You guys, if you've never seen that video, you need to go and watch it because you will understand. It was just you could literally, it was palpable. You could feel that fear and that uncertainty in your eyes. I think that's why it resonated with so many people.
And if I may, I'm a military veteran.
Thank you.
It was my pleasure
What
serving
branch?
Navy. Navy.
Thank you.
My pleasure, truly. Being in the military was my first time ever having 3 meals a day in my life. So it gave me a lifeline. It gave me a way out, but it also taught me focus. And so in that video, what you're seeing is focus in the presence of absolute fear. I'm calmly talking. I'm speaking as clearly as I can because I know that in the case of emergency, me being overcome with the fear and the emotion of what I'm feeling and the weight of the situation is not going to help solve the problem. So I need to be calm and communicate clearly to solve and think through the issue.
Yeah. By August 1st of 2021, you stated in another video that the doctors were trying to prepare you for the worst. They didn't think Cierra was going to make it, and the word hospice was brought into the conversation. That must have been absolutely impossible to hear. Did you think at that point that they were maybe jumping the gun? What were your thoughts in that moment?
So as I sat down with doctors and hospice, so it wasn't just being thrown around. I come into the hospital that day and there was a full-on consult
Mm.
that was like, I didn't want to have that consult, but it was kind of like sprung on me, like, because they needed to give me a reality check, right? Of where we actually were.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not faulting any medical system or hospital system for being honest about what something is. Hospice is a best case scenario for some people, right?
Mhm.
It is
I work in hospice now, and it's a beautiful, underutilized part of the healthcare system.
and I didn't know that. I didn't know that then, right? To me, it just felt like, because I wasn't prepared enough medically,
Mhm.
in a way, it felt like a part of it felt like they were trying to get me to end her life. A part of me felt that way, but that wasn't it at all, because I have a slight medical background. I used to be an EMS, and I went to school to be an EMT and firefighter at one point. And so I understand the way triage works. And my brain kicked in and said, they have to tell you the details and be very clear about what they think is going to happen here,
Yeah.
because there are other people in line that need care who are more valuable than your spouse, right? So it was absolutely that hospital system's job to give me the facts, but it was
Yeah.
absolutely my job to bring my faith.
Right.
It was absolutely my job to advocate for my spouse and give her every fighting chance that I could, because she deserved that as a human being. She deserved that as a woman. She deserves that as a mother. She deserved that as my friend. So at that point, she had been sick maybe 12 days, but we had been married 12 years, and I owed her more than 12 days.
I think you stated that perfectly.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking, for people that may ask, Miles was fine, because I'm just thinking of other questions. Miles obviously did not test positive for
The
COVID.
baby.
Yeah, did well. I'm assuming had great APGARs, so there was no issue there with Miles, because I know some people may wonder that. The other
Leave
thing
it
that I
to
was
an
going to
L&D nurse to bring up the
I know, but
APGARs.
I'm just
Sorry.
thinking that because that is the first question: is the baby okay? Is the baby showing any? And especially if you hear too that they felt that there was a strong enough need to deliver the baby, because if her oxygen sats were low, obviously his oxygen saturations were not up to what they were supposed to be, and then you start thinking, well, has the baby not been having proper blood flow to the
Yeah.
important parts? Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. So thank goodness Miles was okay.
So even when it came to leaving the hospital with Miles, they gave me a very stark warning. They said, we don't know what's going to happen with your wife. We don't know which way this is going to go. If we end up having to take other measures and put her on a ventilator, the last thing you would want is to wake up and this child not to be healthy and whole.
Mm-hmm.
For her to wake up and this child not to be healthy and whole.
Mm-hmm.
So please, 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 he has no immune system. He was just born.
Yeah.
Right. Please don't have him around people who aren't vaccinated. Please don't have him around people who aren't masked. Please don't have him around people just, sharing him so they could hold him and see him. Yeah. This is a heightened climate. This is not a normal situation. And you need to have this guy under lock and key as much as possible.
Good advice. I'm glad they told you that.
Yeah.
And I valued that advice. That was just hard advice to communicate to people around me, because they can't feel your pain or your struggle when you're going through something like that. Right? Moms and dads and grandparents and
right. And they just want to get a hold of that baby. They just, I want to see that. Let me hold that baby. And you're like, I'm sorry, I can't.
So it was quite the debacle in a way to be around people with different medical backgrounds and different medical opinions about what I should do and shouldn't do, and have to say, hey guys, unfortunately, I'm doing the best I can with what I know. And I'm not upset with anyone for not being vaccinated. I'm not upset with anyone for not being masked. You just can't be here right now.
For you.
Which was a hard thing to do, but not harder than having my wife wake up and tell her our baby is dead.
Was anybody mad at you? Did you ever have anybody that was like felt like you were being rude? Because I can relate to that. I actually have a sibling I don't even speak with anymore because of different opinions on vaccines. That's a whole other thing. But was there anybody that was mad or didn't want to talk to you because you wouldn't let them?
And I can't go into it past this point, but there were plenty of people.
Okay, fair enough. I figured.
Yeah.
Who felt like,
you were being over the top. Yeah, I get it.
What is this guy doing?
I get it. We totally can relate. Okay, on that note, we'll change. We're going to go into the next question. What was visitation like for you guys during that point in the pandemic? What was visitation for you like? What was your ability to spend time with Cierra? And what was visitation with the children like, if any? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So I'll pick it up here and say after Cierra gave birth to Miles, we actually didn't have a person who would watch our kids because they themselves had COVID and they were on the last day of quarantining. So they just had one more day of quarantining. And so the only reason I could go and be a part of the Miles and be a part of the birth, and when I say a part of it, he was born. This was the first time in my life that I wasn't allowed in a delivery room.
Right.
Or able to make the delivery of one of my kids, which tears me up till this day. Right. I don't have a father who was in my world. And so being there for my children's birth means absolutely everything to me. With that being said, our kids were in the last couple of days of quarantine and somebody found and said, hey, I'll take them for you so you can make the birth, but I can't keep them longer than X amount of time.
Right.
And the hospital protocol was they called me and said, hey, this is the head of the hospital. If you come, you can't leave. And if you leave, you can't return.
Yeah, I remember that.
You
they
can't
did that in
leave.
labor and delivery. Yeah. You can't go
What
in
do
and
you
out.
mean?
You can't go in and out. Like if you're there and you're the person's significant other, that's it. Because every time you go in and out, you're exposing yourself to
like you can leave, but you can't come back if you leave.
Yes.
Right. That's it.
Okay. Got it.
I remember that. Yeah.
They were very clear on those instructions. You can come here and you can be here, but you can't leave. And if you leave, you cannot return. So they were very clear on those instructions for COVID. And so because we didn't have anybody to watch our kids, so I could be at the hospital, I couldn't come back.
And a lot of parents dealt with that. A lot of parents went through that didn't have, or, people that moved here and their families are out of town. Like that was a struggle. There were some moms that never had the significant other there at all, not even a couple hours, because there was nobody to watch the kids. That happened, unfortunately, a lot.
And so I got to stay for 2 days. And that was great because we got the experience that we typically get in a room. Right. But then when it was time for me to leave, that same day, they called me back and said Miles was ready to go home. And so for the first time in our, at the time, 12-year marriage, I had to drive a baby home without Cierra in the car. To the degree of at one point, I forgot that she wasn't in the car. And so I reached back and said, babe, how is he?
Oh, so you're used to that. Yeah.
And I looked back when she didn't say anything and realized she is.
I'm solo here. I am solo. Wow.
And so I was so worried about him in that back seat. I just put my hand on his little foot and I would just rub the bottom of his foot to make sure he was alert and awake and feeling me. And I had to drive with him all the way an hour home. And so that was very nerve-wracking.
So hard. I remember because every time I delivered, I would sit in the back seat because you're worried about their little necks.
Yeah.
You're worried about them not being able to breathe. And, it's all those little things that you don't think about, and you don't have your partner there
I was
to do
panicked
that.
because I would have to do those car seat challenges with babies before they would get discharged all the time. And you know what can happen if they're not in that right position. And if you can't visualize them because they're rear facing and all. Yeah. So scary.
I drove like this, one hand on the wheel, other hand back here on his foot.
I'm sure you did.
Nothing is happening to this precious package. And then after that, because I couldn't return to the hospital, it was just text messages between Cierra and I, day after day after day after day after day. But every 3 days she would decline. So it went from video messaging and like talking on FaceTime to solely text messaging from text messaging to a text every other day. And then me communicating with doctors.
Yeah.
And then finally I got a FaceTime from her. And when I got this FaceTime, I was like, oh man, this is going to be great. This is going to be amazing. She's FaceTiming me. I'm FaceTiming her today. She must be feeling better.
Yeah, you're
and
like,
so
yes.
she FaceTimes me. I go, hey babe, I need to tell you all the crazy things that are happening. We have all this support. Like people are showing up and sending help and sending aid. And this is happening. And I talked to your best friend and I'm telling her all these good things that are happening. And I'm like, you look tired. Are you okay? And she just shakes her head. And I say, do you need anything? Is there anything I can do? And she says, no. I say, okay, well, I love you and I'll talk to you soon. And she says, okay, bye. And then I get the camera flashing from her to medical professionals in spacesuits.
Oh my gosh.
And they say, we're going to take care of her. She's going to be just fine. I say, okay, thanks guys. And they hang up. And then later I get a phone call from the charge nurse that says, hey, Jamal, this is charge nurse whoever. As you know, we had to put Cierra on a ventilator. And I go,
What?
You didn't know.
And they say, yeah, we have it here in report that she called you and told you that she was going to be put on a ventilator. And I said, that she did call me, but that's not the conversation that happened. And I was explaining them what happened and explaining them. And they said, well, she is now in a medically induced coma on a ventilator. And, after rehashing that moment and even talking to Cierra when she was awake, and alert and, we're living a normal life, I realized that I would have begged and pleaded for her life as if what the hospital was going to do was something horrible. And she wouldn't have wanted the last time she saw me to be me begging for her life.
So you think she purposely didn't?
She was protecting you.
That is the kind of person Cierra is, though. She wouldn't want to tell me information like that, right? And that's not what she would have wanted to see. So
yeah,
that totally makes sense. Like, as hard as that is, she just wanted to hear you and talk to you, just in case that was her last time. Well, that's hard.
As a family member during that time, how was it kind of observing things from your perspective when you were there? Could you tell that it was taking a toll on doctors and nurses, or did they seem to hide it well? Could you tell if there was any short staffing, those kind of pressures?
Yeah.
Any of that?
As far as doctors and nurses go, I think the main doctor that was seeing up everything, great guy. When you're a doctor like that, you have to be both salesy and tactful.
Yeah.
Right. When you're the guy that's running the show, there's a face you have to present, and there are details that you have to give while you present those things. And when we were in the room and he was telling me about the hospice opportunity, and it was kind of like a disbelief for me that I was having that conversation. I had to look at him and say, he had to tell me, hey, unfortunately, we're looking at your wife and her brain activity is non-responsive because of the oxygen not getting to her brain. We don't know how long she didn't have oxygen in her brain. We don't know what that looks like, but that is now added onto the issues of the worst chest x-ray we ever seen.
God. They said that? The worst chest? Oh my gosh.
They showed me and said her lungs are non-existent. You can't see them here.
My goodness.
And so you have that issue, and then there may be some heart issues going on as well because of what COVID does. And so, and he was telling me this, and as he was telling me this, I said, "Hey, man, I need you to understand that you're gifted and you're talented." And I said to him these words. I said, "And I believe that God made you that way."
Oh, that's so sweet.
And I said, you feel so in control of what you're doing as a doctor that maybe you feel like she wouldn't have that oxygen, she wouldn't have gotten to her brain if you were here. And he kind of shrugged his shoulders like that. And I said, "It's okay." I said, "It's not your fault. I'm not mad." And I said, "But she's going to make it." And I said, "I know that feels made to feel like a delusional statement to you because I've just gotten the worst news of my adult life." I said, "But I'm telling you, she's going to make it." And I could see that was a hard conversation for him and a hard conversation for the hospice team, because I'm sitting here as a husband saying, "Hey, you don't understand. I'm the person people come to when they have bad news. That's how this works, right?" So I am optimistic, even though you're giving me these facts, and I'm not mad at the facts you're giving me, but this is what I believe is going to happen. So as far as seeing it take a toll, I saw it in his eyes. I saw it in the hospice team. I saw it in some of the nurses' conversations when they had to tell me that, "Hey, man, you're being maybe a bit delusional here, right?"
Mm-hmm.
But there's this interesting balance that happens when you have medical professionals who have to tell you what they see on paper,
Mm-hmm.
and you're a person who is hopeful, and you have to tell them what you're going to do because of how much hope you have, right? And it's not a balance of them just trying to discredit me or me trying to discredit them. It's a human being doing their best that they can to hold on to the iota of hope that they have.
Yeah.
But
So
Jamal, I will tell you, if you may remember this when you talked with my husband, who's an OBGYN, in private, he would tell me that this ain't good, babe. Like this, her chances. I mean, he was talking lung transplant to me. Like,
yeah.
I just, because we all had hope for you and for Cierra. Like, everybody that was pulling. Like, I mean, I literally daily would go to your page so I could see if you had an update. Like, that's how connected all of us were. And even my husband, that he was in well, we won't say what happens, but I'll tell you, complete disbelief, because yes, they are taking the science, they're taking the data, the facts that they're given, and it's on paper, no, it did not look good. It didn't, to the point that I believe it was the next day that they talked to you about ECMO.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a whole nother.
That's the last step, really. That's your last ditch.
You hear ventilator,
effort.
ECMO, minimal to nothing brain activity.
Mm-hmm.
Any physician that is any decent physician would say,
prepare yourself.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
For people that don't know what ECMO is, Jamal, how was it explained to you? This wasn't a question I had, but how did they, the
corporeal oxygen?
Yeah. So what they said to me, and I feel like they explained it very well, was they said that ECMO was going to be a way to help oxygenate Cierra's blood. So they showed me the tubes that they put in her body, and they said, "We're putting this tube in, and blood is going to flow in this tube, and it is going to be light red, bright red. And it's going to flow out, and it's going to be dark red. And that's because as it flows, it's receiving oxygen and being cleaned by the machine. And this is going to give her her best fighting chance of being oxygenated as she moves forward." And they said, also, we want you to know, Mr. Chubb, we only have 3 of these machines in the hospital.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
wow.
one of them is in use. The other one we're going to use on your wife, but it's at the end of its life. So we're going to have to pull it out and
God,
put
I
the other
remember
one,
that.
the backup in.
My
Same thing with
gosh.
vents. There weren't enough vents to go around. It was unreal.
So,
I think a lot of people think a ventilator is going to oxygenate you, but when your lungs aren't working right, there's only so much a ventilator can do. I mean,
correct.
you can try and have it all the way at max settings, but if your body can't get it out there, that's really, I think that's another good way for people to understand that. That's really the only way that she's going to have a fighting chance at getting the oxygen she needs at her brain and, everywhere else.
Correct. And furthermore, I want to make sure I add this. Cierra went into pregnancy having gestational diabetes, and she wanted to take as little insulin as possible for that gestational diabetes. So she started eating a diet that was very low carb and protein based and leafy green based. This caused her to lose weight while she was pregnant with Miles. So, and because she was able to lose that weight, they were like, hey, if Cierra had been 10 pounds heavier, we wouldn't have been able to offer this ECMO machine to you. But she's right there at where she needs to be weight wise and health wise to be able to receive this treatment.
That's good. Thank goodness.
Which
right?
was amazing. So, yeah.
Now we're going to take a moment to hear a word from our sponsors. Erica, with Halloween right around the corner, it made me think of something really scary. The smells that we deal with on a daily basis while we're at work, that right there is spooky enough. That's why I wanted to highlight Stink Bomb Odor Blocker so that you don't have to be scared this Halloween season.
This spooky season, yeah. You just take a little dab of it, put it under your nose, no one can see it. It fits in your pocket like a chapstick. Best thing ever. Covers all of those nasty smells that we are exposed to all the time. And it's made by an ER nurse.
And what I like this coffee smell, I like this one. I hadn't talked about this one yet. It reminds me of like the fall. I'm a coffee drinker. I love coffee. And this one is absolutely amazing. I would check it out. Go to stinkbombodorblocker.com and fight those horrendous scents, girls and gentlemen. We need to.
And use code UNCORKED15 for 15% off.
Okay, we're back. So were you noticing any struggles with, was there a low supply of PPE at that point? Because there was, obviously that was a huge struggle in healthcare. Was that still happening at that point, or was that anything you were even aware of? Could you tell as an outsider?
Yeah. So I didn't feel like that was an issue at all. Like every time I went to the hospital, everyone had everything that they needed to have on to be there and to do their job.
Now, whether they were having to reuse a mask, you probably wouldn't know.
I would never know, right? I would never know that. The staff was so supportive and so caring. This is what it felt like. The first time I showed up into the hospital, and I have to really brag on these guys over at Prisma Health in Columbia, South Carolina. Okay. The first time I show up to the ICU, the room stopped. And I'm not kidding you. I'm not joking. The first time they finally said, hey, you can come see your wife. This was when she was hooked up in the ICU and they needed me to have this hospice conversation. Everything stood still when I walked in. Nurses that I that weren't even attached to what Cierra was going through and had other patients offered me a chair and offered me water and said that I could sit there as long as I needed to. Because in their minds, one, they knew that this was likely over, but two, they were already watching on social media. So when I walked in, they already knew who I was and who was laying there in the hospital bed. And I'll say this: there were a lot of people who shared their COVID stories on social media. I'm a person that has been doing speaking and storytelling for a very long time at this point in my life, right? Even though I'm only 36. But I'll say I knew that when I was telling our story and sharing our story, the stakes, right? And so the best way to advocate for a person when you're when you have limited financial resources and you have 100-year pandemic that lots of people are dying from, is to create extreme awareness, right? Because I'm not rich enough to fight this, right? But I can create awareness and influence and relationships around it. So,
yeah. You documented her journey almost every day on social media. Were most people kind and supportive, or were you on the receiving end of backlash, anti-vaxxers, anything along those lines?
yeah, so there were two extreme cases that I would run across in comments.
Oh boy.
So again, I'll bring this up again. The first case was, hey, this is God's punishment. You know, you're not living your life the way you are.
Yeah.
You're the way you're supposed to be. Your wife probably deserved to die because of things that you've done.
Oh, that's mean.
I ran across that quite a bit. On the other end of the spectrum were people saying, if she wasn't vaccinated, she deserves to die. If she was dumb enough not to have a vaccine, she deserves to be dead.
Where she couldn't have even had it yet because it wasn't recommended. And
there were pre-trials that were happening, right? And people felt like, here's the thing about being on the internet that I need people to understand. The internet moves so fast and the world moves so fast, right? Nobody gave let's just be honest. At the time I was 33, right? I'm 33 years old. Feeling invincible in all situations, right? I wasn't raised to know what the CDC gave a shit about.
Right.
Who knows? Who's sitting down at their table and saying, well, the CDC needs to, right? A select few people.
Well, we were. The nurses were every day.
Again, if that's the life that you were brought up in or the life that you have to live, you just don't know.
Right.
We're just human beings living a human experience, and people expect you to know the details that came out yesterday.
Yeah.
They expect you to know. They expect you to be outside of. They expect you to know these things, and so people look at the content and the information that we share with them from their seat of the knowledge that they have, right? But everybody's not you, and everybody doesn't have access to the same information that you have access to, or even been given the things that they should know about, stuff. So, and so people were telling me about pre-trials. Well, the pre-trials have been out, blah, 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 and she should have gotten in there, and shame on her. She did this to herself, and she did this to her family.
But if you don't have an OBGYN there to say, hey, this vaccine is available now, we're recommending you get it at now that, it's available. Like I don't even think it was quite to that point yet. Like it wasn't where it was like a standard of care.
It was not.
So, right. Yeah. So how was she supposed to?
It was not
to know.
And even
I heard from a lot. I'm sorry.
No,
I heard from a lot of nurses at that time that they started the mandates, and they were in fear of losing their job, that were pregnant. And so many of them were like, I am so pro-vaccine. If it was just me, I would have gotten it last week. No problem getting, but I'm pregnant.
Right.
And I understood that. There's so much fear when you're in that vulnerable position, but I can't imagine.
And so that's what I mean by the internet leaves no room for nuance. Multiple things can be true at one time.
True. Yeah, they can.
Right? But we live in this culture, in this society where it's either black or it's white. No. Let's be humans, because we're human beings, not human doings. Let's be human beings and take in the situation for what it is.
There's many variables, variables.
And people can't prioritize those variables in their mind, unfortunately.
Because Cierra was a vaccinated individual, correct? Like normal vaccines growing up, like it wasn't like she's like, oh, I don't want to get my diphtheria. She was a vaccinated person, but you throw in a pandemic, people don't know you're pregnant. They're telling you, I don't know. We're throwing this together in the lab. We're not sure. That's tough.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe your kid will only have 2 arms. We don't know, but hey.
This is our best scientific guess, and that's all we can give you is our best scientific guess. And I can appreciate a person who studied and learned giving me their best guess. That, but when it comes to a person being pregnant and their baby, right? That's not, I wouldn't want to be in that position.
It's tough.
At all. So
that's tough. Yeah. You don't have 200 years of scientific data to go off of. I mean, people were pulling stuff out of whatever they could come up with, so that's hard. And people are so judgmental. I mean, on social media, I can't even imagine the things that you heard, especially you're sensitive already. You're on edge because you may lose the love of your life, the mother of your children, and you have people saying she should die. I don't know how you remained calm or composed, because I would have lost my shit. I'm sorry, but and you always seemed so calm to me. Like, you were always so, like, even the couple times, and this kind of leads me to the next question. On August 22nd of 2021 was the first time you really started to talk about the vaccines. And you were bringing up, like, hey, it's important. Look at what can happen. Look at this. And what made you start talking about that? Was it because of the negative you were hearing? Was it a combination of that with, look at where my wife is? Like, what made you switch to that shift of, like, hey, I need to start letting people know this is important?
Well, a couple things. So let me back up just a hair. The reason I was able to remain so confident was because of people like you, Jessica, right? Who were supportive and sharing and caring, right? The internet is not a real place, but it's got a real impact.
Yeah, true.
And so when you have a Jessica Seitz right there being kind and encouraging, or a Jen Hamilton being kind and encouraging, just these people who I don't know at all, some who got my phone number or I get DM'd me, reached out, right? I had all the support anybody would want to have going into this kind of situation, right? So I was able to be that calm. So that's the contrast. The negative people on the internet was there was so much love and so much influence from people who didn't owe me shit, who didn't know me from Adam, who didn't care that I'm some large black man crying on the internet. They just cared about my family. They unequivocally gave a shit that we got through this. So everybody,
we felt like we knew you guys. Literally, we felt like, oh, well, that's Jamal and Cierra. Like, I mean, when I tell you, I'm not joking. Every day I would go, I wanted to know. And there was a couple days here and there that you didn't post because you were exhausted, or and we all were holding our breath. Like, oh boy, like what has happened?
So I believe that we do this thing where we discount people's experience because it's not ours.
Yeah.
I'm a military veteran. I've got every freaking cocktail in me because I've had to travel the world that the military has ever cooked up to protect you from something.
Yeah.
So me getting one more vaccine was like, throw it in.
Why not? Might as well at this point.
Throw it in, right?
Yeah.
And so I got that as soon as it was available, before anybody in my family got it. And I did that because if it was going to hurt people in my family, let it get to me first, right? And everybody in the house, my kids who were unvaccinated, my wife who was unvaccinated, got COVID.
Yep.
Nothing happened to me. Nothing. Not a thing. Right? So as people are having this conversation back and forth about, well, this is what COVID is, and this is what COVID isn't, and this is what the vaccine is, and this is what the vaccine isn't. Cool. Let me tell you my experience with this vaccine. Let me tell you how everyone around me literally got sick, and my wife is fighting for her life, right? But I've never gotten it one time. Never lost a taste, a smell, a cough. I'm fine. Yeah. So I just wanted people to know that as controversial as vaccines were, that if they were looking for an answer, this was an option. And I'm not saying it was an option for everybody, right? And I wanted to have some compassion in there with people who just didn't give a shit too, right? Like they don't give a shit about masking. They don't give a shit about social distancing. They didn't give a shit about any of that stuff, right? But still, again, I can't say people only see things one way and then not have compassion for people who see things differently than I see it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just trying to, with my best effort, say, guys, I know you think this thing is the devil. I know that you think this is crazy or that this is not real, but this helped me. And thank God that my kids aren't struggling with losing 2 parents instead of 1, because that happened enough times,
Yeah.
right? Where people would lose 2 whole parents instead of 1 parent to COVID.
I just want to say that speaks volumes about you as a person, though, because you're going through one of the worst moments of your entire life and you care enough to take a minute to maybe change one person's mind, 2 people's mind. Like there's a lot of people that would have just shut down. There's a lot of people that just would have been, for lack of a better word, fuck you. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I don't have the energy for this, and to me, it showed a lot of your character because it wasn't all just about, hey, this is what's going on with Cierra. I need your support. I need your prayers. It was, I care enough about you and your family to not let this happen to somebody else. And I just really think, and as a nurse and being in the profession, it meant a lot to us in healthcare to see that.
Well, and I'll say this too, guys. We have platforms, right? Between us, there are millions of people that gather to connect with us, right? And so I'll say, when you have a platform that big, whether it happened overnight or whether you've built it over a long time, you have to ask yourself, what's my responsibility?
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
I don't care that my world was crumbling down. I don't care that what was on the line. I had to ask myself clearly and consciously, okay, there are 150,000 people here at this point.
Mm-hmm.
What's my responsibility?
You have a playlist on your page that documents this entire journey, and it is still there because
it's like
while we're getting to the good parts, and where she does turn the corner, there's a lot of ups and downs, you guys. It's they tried to wean the vent, they had to put her back up, they had to put a tracheostomy in her. Like there's a lot of things that people like. You are transparent and you get into all of this. So that's on your page, which is called Jamal and Cierra Chubb on TikTok, correct? Just so that
it's
okay.
The name of the page is the Chubb House.
Yeah.
But it's then, our names, Jamal and Cierra. We're up there.
Okay. So either way they can find you, but the actual handle now is the Chubb House. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can go through all of those. Was there ever a time that prior to her showing signs that she was turning the corner, like when she first becomes a tiny bit where she can start moving, and did they ever say, wow, it's looking like she's having more brain activity? Were they testing that? Were they looking at that? Or was it just like, oh, this is a miracle? What the heck just happened?
So let me give it to you this way. And let me give it to you this way. This was a steady process. There was one day when she was in August, when she was in ICU, she had her eyes closed the whole time. One day they were just open.
Okay.
And the nursing staff and doctors say that's just something that happens. That doesn't mean that she's a viable patient, right? Because they are looking for those signs that she is viable and she's coherent, right? After her eyes being open, she went to a phase where her head starts to scan the room.
Okay.
Right. Hey, Jamal, unfortunately, because of all these issues, brain damage, whatever, that's still not a viable sign that she's coherent and alert. And that just happens. Because she's still going in and out of consciousness, but these are things we're seeing. One day, she wakes up and starts talking to the nurse.
Okay, what are you going to tell me about that one?
Right.
Can't deny that one.
Well, and the nurse called us on the phone and said, Cierra's here right now. It woke Liv and I up. We got the call and we're talking to Cierra. The nurses say she's blinking, she's acknowledging, right? But the doctor didn't see it. unless the doctor sees it.
No.
That doesn't make it viable, right? She's still, not viable. And so then one day I'm going to her room and I'm talking to one of her nurses, and she was a great nurse. And I walk in the room and I see Cierra. She's sitting up watching Law and Order SVU. This is my wife. She's watching. She's doing what she normally does at home.
Like, yeah, you're like, what? She's okay. She's okay.
She's watching Law and Order SVU, and I go into the room and nobody's there, right? And I go, "Hi, babe," and she goes, because she can't speak because she's got a trach in. And I say, "I'll be right back." And I go out there to talk to the nurse, and I say, "Have you seen Cierra this morning?" And she said, "Yeah, I did. And she did something really odd this morning. She covered herself up while we were cleaning her, like she knew she was naked." And so, I said, "Come in here for a second."
They hadn't seen her yet.
And she comes in, and I say, the nurse's name. Gosh, it's escaping me right now, and I'm so mad because she's a phenomenal nurse. She goes, "I'm going to call the doctor." Because I haven't, she starts talking, "Hi, Cierra, how are you?" And Sierra's like, "Good, blah, blah, blah." And so the doctor comes in and says, "Hey, can you, start asking your commands. Cierra, can you wiggle your fingers for me?" She wiggles them, left hand, right hand, left foot, right foot, starts wiggling and moving things the best she can. And he looks at me and goes, "We haven't seen her do anything like this before. I'm going to call the head doctor to come down here and talk to her." And in between waiting for the head doctor and this doctor leaving, I'm sitting here with Cierra and I'm saying, "Hey, do you know where you are?" And she says, "Yeah, I'm in the hospital." I said, "Do you know why you're here?" She says, "No."
Wow.
And I say, "Okay." I said, "Can I hold your hand?" And she gives me her hand. And I say, "You are here because you got COVID and you died. And they brought you back."
That's true. I remember that she did.
And the look on her face was so Cierra when I said that. She goes,
I love it.
I said, "You died and they brought you back." And I said, "But I want to show you some stuff." I said, "Look, here's a message from Liv and Langston." And she starts watching the video and I said, "Look at Liv and look at Langston." And I hold up another picture and I say, "Do you know who this is?" And she goes, and I say, "This is Miles. Wow. This is the baby you were pregnant with when you got here to the hospital."
Oh my gosh.
And she goes, he's so, makes the face like, "He's so cute." So then the doctor comes in and he says, "Hey, Cierra, how are you?" And she says, nods her head like that. And she says, "Do you remember me?" And she goes, "Yep." And, and they start talking and having a bit of a conversation. After the conversation, he says, "Well, it was good to see you. I'm so glad you're feeling better." He says, "Can I talk to you in the hallway, Jamal?" I say, "Yeah." And he says, "I'm hesitant to say this." And this
Were
is
they
the same.
thinking it was a rally? That just occurred to me. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, I do know what a rally is. I do know what a rally is. And he says, "I'm hesitant to say this because I've not seen it before. But it looks like you guys might have turned a corner here. I mean, we've still got a long way to go. But this is
something they didn't expect.
That we didn't expect this."
Yeah.
So
wow. I mean, just to defy all the odds, and so many people did not. I mean, this was not common with COVID at this point. I mean,
there's two videos that really stand out as you were documenting Cierra's journey, and she began to kind of beat the odds. One was on October 21st of 2021. When you showed her walking in the halls of the hospital with a walker, practically running. And the other was the next day, which was day 90, I believe, of her hospitalization, when you told your daughter that Cierra was off the ventilator, and what an emotional video that one was. And again, we'll link that in the description of this. But how important were those milestones?
Oh gosh.
Look at a smile already.
Oh man.
I love those videos. I love those videos.
Listen, those milestones were everything. Those milestones were everything. When you're seeing Cierra on October 21st walking, I think it was probably just days prior, she and I had to have the conversation about lung transplants.
Yeah.
So, and Sierra's like, listen, if this is going to happen, let's just rip the Band-Aid off so you guys can heal and, move on. That was, but at the time we were having that conversation and she was awake on a ventilator and had beat the ECMO machine because she beat ECMO within 28 days. We're having this lung transplant conversation and she's awake for it sitting next to me. And I haven't seen her in months.
Mm.
I hadn't seen her like prior, before that. We're talking the end of July. And I've been able to go in and see her in August, but I haven't been able to have coherent conversations with my partner.
See her. Yeah.
Right. Where she's there and I'm seeing her and seeing her see me and her be coherent with what's going on. Right. So, so that was a huge, huge, huge deal to show her walking because she's trying to beat the odds of, I don't even want to have a lung transplant. We're skipping that part and we're moving. And then telling my daughter that video was important for me to show the world because both of those videos, but especially this, confirmed some things that I had always knew. Right? I had always knew that Cierra was going to pull through this. And my daughter, being 7 years old at the time, I had to have a real hard conversation with her.
Yeah.
Kid, listen, you're probably going to hear your, other family members talk about this. You might see it on the news, but this is what you need to know. Every medical professional in the country has every right to believe that your mom is going to die. And I said, there are only a handful of people who don't believe that, and I need you to be one of them.
Mm.
And I said, so what we're about to go through are really hard days. And I said, but you need to understand that your dad is going to do everything possible. And we have medical professionals that are going to do everything possible to make sure we get your mom back to you and your brothers. So when I'm making a video with her and for her, see, sometimes there's so many layers to why things happen and why I did things the way I did them, right? When I'm making this video for my kid and for the world to see and saying, hey, guess what? Your mom's off a ventilator and she takes off running around the car.
Well, you're skipping the best part though, because you tell her she's off the vent and she says,
for how long?
How many minutes?
How does that...
And you're like, no, she's off the vent.
How does that feel to you to hear a 7-year-old know that the weaning process takes time? And she asks about minutes. Yeah. How does that feel to you as a medical professional?
That she knew way more than she should for that young age.
Yeah. And she knew the struggle she's been going through daily. She knew she tried, but then she couldn't breathe and mommy had to go back on it. So she's been used to getting this news day after day, so in her mind was it a little longer today? Yay. Yeah. And then for you to be able to tell her, no, she's off. I mean, her face was priceless. I mean, we got to put that one too. We got to link both of those videos because she is just ecstatic, pure joy. I mean, there is no money in the world that could ever replace something like that because it was absolutely amazing. And the other video of you watching her walk to me is very important because it shows your love for her. You were so proud of her. It was like he just look at you go, you couldn't believe it. Literally, she looked like she was flying around the house. She was trying so hard.
And listen, I'll say this. When you're married for a long time, you get to see a lot of a person, right? And the level of fight that I saw in Cierra, I'm like, who's this? Who are you? Nice to meet you. I'm Jamal. You want to come to my house later?
You're a sexy mama.
Just seeing her have that level of fight, and I know she's tough, but it's one thing to be tough, and it's another thing to be a fighter, right? And she's just like, dude, I'm getting out of here.
Now, a big topic in the news still is long COVID. We still don't understand that. And so how is Cierra now? Does she have any long lasting effects?
Cierra still struggles with foot drop.
Okay.
You can't really tell when you see her because her stride is so good now.
Yeah.
Right. But she still struggles with foot drop to the degree of, because she had to learn how to walk again and drive again and do all these things. So she is in constant pain all the time. It's not like she lives in chronic pain.
Oh.
Because she kind of had to change the way she walked, even her hips on both sides like hurt because she doesn't walk like us. There's still a little bit of a pivot, right? And so that causes her body to, so there's that. She does find herself out of breath from time to time, or winded, right? When she's walking and doing things, she's easily winded from things. But when I say easily, I need to check myself because she's gotten so much freaking better.
Right.
She looks amazing in videos. She's
gotten so much freaking better. We were just on a walk the other night, right? And homegirl was like, "You think I could jog to the door?" Yeah, but don't do it.
You're like, do you want to?
Her capacity is maybe 80% of what it once was, but there are things that she is still getting better at, right? Like even now, like if you talked to me 6 months ago, she could move her foot and move a toe, but she couldn't wiggle toes. But now she can do a little twinkle toe thing, right? Like, so there's extreme progress happening in her life.
Some people might be wondering why Cierra isn't here talking on the podcast. I know she did do the interview with Good Morning America, I believe, back when, right? But do you want to kind of explain that?
Cierra is, how do I say this? I'm the people person. She's the introvert. So I'm the extrovert, right? And some of these conversations are hard for her to have. Now, after having this conversation with you, I don't think it would have been so hard, right, for her, because you guys have taken like the appropriate tone that she would feel was like great. But also, so maybe there's an opportunity for you guys to sit down with her if you want to in the future.
If she wants to, we would love it. That's always an open invitation.
But she just like people asking her questions and that she just is like, they're hard for her to answer.
Yeah.
Because it was a really complicated and hard time in her life, right?
Of course.
So for us in that way, there are some things that are just waking up for us again, right? This season, this year would be a year, and this season of our life would be a season where we finally feel like we've overcome a lot of the hurdles that came with that. Right. So it's hard for her to have that conversation.
Totally makes sense.
I know you recently quit your 9-to-5.
I did.
Regular corporate job, and now you're kind of pursuing your dream. Congratulations. As a motivational speaker.
Correct, yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and what led you to kind of take that leap of faith?
Because, we can't tell that you're a motivational speaker.
Right, no, not at all.
I don't know where that came from. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm humbled and I'm encouraged by that. Yeah, so listen, I've been through a lot of hardships in life. I wish I could say what Cierra and I have been through was the first hard, terrible thing that I've been through. But I can think of instantly right now many days that were just steps below that hard for me in my life. And I believe that if you had to go through something like that, if you've had to endure hardship, damn it, it better have been for a reason. And only you can say what that reason was.
Yeah.
And I just choose to believe that anything that I've ever dealt with, including almost losing my spouse to COVID-19, there is a purpose that can be found in the tragedy. I am not a person that believes that everything happens for a reason, but I do believe you can use everything for a purpose. And so as I look at my life, and I saw my wife, her heart stop on 2 occasions during this time, and subsequently lost my mom the year after Cierra had gotten just enough recovered. I look at these things and I go, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to live the most fulfilled version of my life while I am here. And that starts right now. And I'm not taking anything away from corporate America. I'm not taking anything away from those opportunities that I was given and the opportunities that I worked for really, really hard in corporate America. But I am saying, if I'm not living, I'm already dead.
Well said.
And so jumping out, being a motivational speaker is something that I've always wanted to do, but it is very much my way of taking my power back from the things that life throws at you and using it to empower people who need hope and who need to know that there's a future for them and who needs encouragement and who need to know that they're not alone in this thing called life that throws curveballs at everyone in different seasons suddenly.
What's next for the Chubb family? Where can people find you and follow you? And I hear you're maybe writing a book.
I am. Gosh, it's so exciting too. It's so exciting. So I am writing a book about this whole ordeal. You can find us on our family channel, which is at the Chubb House. You can check out my motivational speaking stuff on Framework Motivation. It's right.
I like the hat, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Framework Motivation. And you can book me to speak or anything like that. I'm truly passionate about what we're building in this next season of life. I just want to say I'm super duper thankful and humbled, Erica and Jessica, to have been with you and to be with you and to be connected to you. I am sitting with people who are absolute superheroes.
You're so sweet.
And I know when you're looking at your lives, right? And I need you to really hear me and take this in. It's your normal because this is what you've done. You've just attended people at their bedside. You've taken care of sick people. You've shown up in a hospital system. It's just your normal. Okay. But I need you to understand on the outside, you're wearing a cape, right? You're flying around.
That's
you're
so sweet.
helping broken families or helping families on the verge of being broken stay together because of your interventions. You're sowing your life. You're sowing your very life, because all we really have is time. You're sowing your very life into people as you've taken care of each patient one by one, day by day, room by room, chart by chart. And I need you to know you are the actual heroes to the world that we live in. We don't do anything if we get sick, and if we don't have people who give a damn enough to put on the uniform and take the vitals and, ask, how are you feeling on a scale from 1 to 10, and do the emergency interventions. If we don't have you, we don't have anything. You are the bedrock of people being able to go on. And I'm so thankful for you. And every time I ever get to tell a medical professional, a sanitation hospital worker, an OBGYN,
the fireworks going on,
whoever it is, like anytime I ever get an opportunity to tell you guys that you're heroic and thank you for sacrificing your life to do the profession you do, I will. And please, please, please don't give up on who you've been and who you are, because you're changing, you're sustaining and changing the world.
Thank you for saying that. And a lot of this podcast is that's what it's about. I wish a lot of people saw us the way that you do, and I wish that people understood the fact that so many nurses are leaving the bedside is going to affect people's lives. It's not just affecting
Yeah.
It's going to be somebody that's there in the hospital. It's going to be your family member. It's going to be your loved one. It's going to be, I truly, it means the world to us to hear you say that. And that's why we do what we do, is because we're
And
trying to fight the fight.
we thought it was an important time to tell your story now more than ever, because there is an uptick right now in COVID cases, unfortunately, and it's really not getting the coverage and the attention that it should. I think people are just so tired of it, and the PTSD from it, that no one wants to hear about it, and it's not getting the media attention, but it's happening, and so just, a friendly reminder to everyone out there that you still need to be vigilant and careful and aware of what's going on.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Jamal, so much. Thank you for coming on Nurses Uncorked. This is a blessing. I'm so glad that you circled back around and we finally connected and we were able to do this podcast and tell Cierra's story and your story. And you have such a beautiful, beautiful family. I'm so happy for you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry it took so long.
That's okay. You've been busy.
It's a good time to do it.
Gosh,
You've
listen,
been busy.
if they told me a wife and 3 kids would be like, hey, you're going to do this and it's going to be your whole life, right? Like I said, I just saw a pretty girl and I wanted to be with her for the rest of my life.
Thank you, Jamal.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
Next time on the next Nurses Uncorked.